Befeile am Goltacha shoe de sa claare show, Shiaght Laa, shey Fiona McArdle nish. I'm Fiona McArdle. Hello and welcome to Shiaght Laa. In the programme this week, sa claare and cheayrt shoh. Shenn Houney, Old Hollantide. A date which perhaps doesn't have the significance it once did, but it's been an important date in the island's business and cultural calendar. And Rumsay Eisht nish, Ramsay Past and Present, another in a series produced by Loaghtan Books. This coming Saturday evening, the 12th of November, there will be the final concert by the Summer Singers in St Paul's Church in Ramsay, bringing their 2022 season to a close. This is the concert that was due to have been held in early September, but had to be postponed. The Summer Singers perform a range of music from classical and sacred to pieces from films and television. The concert will be introduced by Mark Tiley, and the Summer Singers will be accompanied by Liz Marshall. They also have special guests taking part, with the tenor Lioaryn Loaghtan and organist Gareth Moore. Admission to the concert is free, but there will be a retiring collection, and there will be refreshments served afterwards. So that's at 7:30 in St Paul's Church in Ramsay this Saturday evening, the 12th of November. The final concert this year by the Summer Singers and their special guests. Ag toideach an cheayrt shoh chai, bí imime dí slai nag an péit an gáil mychione na tainn, na cheayrt comrade mar buitsin, na suirt aglach eile de chreatúr. Gimmerke on an nappen as goil a ren drain, emnesit an banag. Ta ciústa verisiún an Jane vanag, ta righead an mychione an ellen. Ged vel dach verisiún nish gimbré ginny an witch, as an chochiol hoptúne. Ta verisiún an vanag, vús pert na hinja, a lord hoptúne, log dach rona, ach hanel ginny an witch, chitrish der an jerrey. Mar hiel sin an Shiaght Laa cagisha de henne, gau an le no toideach ag lein a grania, sa straih, as a fé Shenn, va hoptúne tachart sa dhooragh ag toideach an chiad Laa Mee Houney. Ach nish, hanel sin cheayrt smunion lein a grania, mar toideach an Laa gain. The annual celebration of hoptúne marks the fact that the first month of winter is the beginning of the Celtic agricultural year. As we heard recently, the tradition that the new day starting immediately after sunset, so the new day actually starts in the darkness before the light reappears, is similar to the tradition that the year starts in darkness and emptiness before moving into the spring, planting and growing, the summer ripening and the bounty of harvest, when all was safely gathered in. And with hoptúne, the whole cycle begins again. With the island so well connected these days, and Halloween being promoted through the media, it's not surprising that the tradition of hoptúne in the island is kept according to the modern calendar. But for a good number of years, from the reform of the calendar in 1752, which jumped the calendar ahead by 11 days, to reconnect the appropriate days of the calendar with observable events like equinoxes and solstices, people kept traditions as though the calendar hadn't been changed. So the tradition of hoptúne and Hollantide were celebrated on the modern calendar's 11th and 12th of November. Cyril Payton dated the foreword to his book, Manx Calendar Customs, to November 1939. In the book, he brings together the traditions of this time of year under October the 31st and November the 11th, and then November the 1st and 12th. He opens the first section with this.
October the 31st and November the 11th. Mee Houney, Hollantide Eve. Shiaght Laa, Old Hollantide Eve. As in Scotland, it's kept as a rule on the old-style date. And from the Manx Society we hear, on Old Hollantide Eve, the 11th of November, It's the custom, particularly in country districts, for boys to go from house to house shouting out hop to nay, accompanied with any quantity of question and answer, whatever version of the banag they have in their area. And again, according to A.W. Moore, the boys who went round singing this song carried big sticks with cabbages or turnips stuck in the top, and with these they knocked at people's doors till they received herrings and potatoes and such like gifts. In fact, this was a custom known as Thump the Door Night.
John Kelly's dictionary has an entry about the Soddag Valw, the dumb cake. Culture Vannon produced a video about this Hollantide tradition, and we hear Isla and Maeve Collister.
I think Hopchinay or Mee Houney was special because they thought that was the old Celtic New Year, and they thought it was a kind of time of where the veil between our world and the other world was at its thinnest. It'd be a time that you'd tell fortunes, and a very superstitious time. Soddag Valw means essentially dumb cake. The Soddag is the kind of style of the cake. It's a thick cake, probably a bit like a bonnig, and Valw mean silent or dumb. So that kind of sums up the whole tradition of it, the importance of being silent during the preparation and the baking of the cake. There would be flour, eggs, eggshells, soot, salt and meal in the Soddag Valw. I think it was meant to be over salted. I don't think this was meant to be a nice cake that you'd find on the Great British Bake Off at all. The ingredients like soot and the eggshells, again it was just to make it quite a disgusting cake. I think it was meant to be quite unpleasant to eat. Everyone and all the women in those days of the household, they were to help knead and make the Soddag Valw, and so it was hand patted, and it would be a three-cornered cake, and that was quite important, and so I think it was quite symbolic, that the three corners.
The whole process had to be done in silence, and then after it was cooked they had to eat a bit of the cake. All the women had to have a piece, and then they'd walk backwards to bed, and then they'd go to sleep, and then that was when they'd see or have signs of their future husband.
Isla and Maeve Collister. Whilst the suited eggshells won't have made a particularly appetising result, the Soddag Valw, as Isla mentioned, is over-salted. We can find out why from A.W. Moore's Folklore of the Isle of Man, which refers to a similar Hollantide tradition.
The following is another Hollantide recipe for dreaming of a future husband. Take a salt herring from a neighbour's house without the consent or knowledge of the owner. Be sure to capture it in the dark, and take the first that comes to hand. Then take it home and roast it in its brine upon the cinders. Maintain strict silence, both while eating it and afterwards, and carefully consume every scrap, bones and all. On the stroke of midnight, retire to bed backwards, undress in the dark, and avoid touching water. If these instructions are properly carried out, the future husband will appear in a dream and will present a drink of water. Yet another recipe was for the girls to fill their mouths with water and hold a pinch of salt in each hand. Thus equipped, they went to a neighbour's door and listened to the conversation within, when the first name mentioned would be that of their future husband. There are various customs practised on this evening in Man. Of these, the burning of nuts for purposes of divination is one of the most popular.
Cyril Payton recalls another Hollantide divination from his own childhood.
I well remember the burning of nuts and ducking for apples, carried out under the directions of a Manx servant when I was a small boy over 50 years ago. 2 nuts were burned at a time, one for a boy and one for a girl. They were placed on the top bar of the grate, and if both burned quietly, the pair would marry. If, however, one or both popped off the bar in the process of burning, that pair wouldn't marry. The apples were floated in a large tub of water, and the boys tried to pick them out with their teeth, which was great fun. The girls were given a wooden-handled kitchen fork, which they held by the handle in their mouths over the tub, and tried to drop it so as to spear an apple. I think that the fork was a modern development at that time.
Carl Roeder's Manx Notes and Queries refers to yet another way for girls to find out about their future husband, which is connected with a tune collected from Thomas Neen of Port St Mary, a nursery song about Pai, Ned, As, Nelly, Gol, Tai, or its other name, Halligan Linky Long. Halligan is a Cornish word for the willow. The song was lost in Cornwall, but Merv Davy there read that it had been taken to the Isle of Man by Cornish miners. So he rang up his friend Colin Jerrey to ask him if he could have a look, just on the off chance that he ever happened to come across it. But Merv was surprised when Colin immediately told him that he knew it, and was able to sing it down the phone to him there and then. First, we'll hear Carl Roeder's description before we hear Linky Long.
On Holy Eve, the girls used to go out at 12 o'clock at night and carry a ball of woolen yarn in their hand, and steal to a barn without anyone knowing anything about it, and twisting the end of it round their wrist, threw the ball in the darkness as far as they could. Then, after a little while, they began to wind it up, beginning at the end twined round their wrist. If the thread was held, they would cry out, "Who is holding the thread?" And they expected whoever held it to say who he was. If there was no answer, they were to be old maids. Mona Douglas collected a version of this from John Mat Mulchreast, and rather than Halligan Linky Long, it's Hamagan Linky Loo. Hamagan Jowlach Linky Loo. Hamagan Jowlach Shentry Loo. Linky Loo as Linky Loo, Cor Dow of Luggan, Ben the Roo. Hamagan Jowlach Linky Loo, Hamagan Jowlach Linky Loo. That's fairly unclear as to what it means, Hamagan, devilish Hamagan Linky Loo. Then there's that line, devilish Hamagan Shentry Loo. Very unclear what that means. Linky Loo and Linky Loo, give me the ball, white or black. Devilish Hamagan Linky Loo.
Turning again to A.W. Moore's folklore of the Isle of Man, he says,
The 12th of November is the general day for letting lands, payment of rent, and for men servants taking their places for the year.
Moore mentions men servants there, and J.J. Neen mentions the Hollantide fair held in Douglas on the 12th of November, which was a hiring fair for men servants. Writing in 1925, J.J. Neen says that it's
still held, although shorn of much of its former merriment and gaiety.
Shiaght Laa, Old Hollantide Day, was the day that William Cubban established Cruinneach Vannin nach Ashunach in 1924, and it ran until the end of the 1920s and was a little more patchy through the 30s until the outbreak of war. But the Cruinneach Vannin nach Ashunach was a one-day festival to coincide with Shiaght Laa, Old Hollantide Day. Finally, this is a saying collected by Carl Roeder and Sophia Morrison in Manx Proverbs and Sayings. Claare be an earth tan here Shiaght Laa, Shenn an earth be de arn Jane Vlain. Whatever earth or direction the wind is on Old Hollantide Day, it will be at that earth 2/3 of the year. Bóineach a traibh agus de rumsé, henk Godred Crovan a talú, sa bhléin jai cíd, nei jegus 3 feet. Lug de filial in elian na chosna de hiad rús sin, tre henke a talú ag a len. Ré recortas riachan vanin as na Hellenen, renne follach a daine lagach scail, as leis cúna yindas as fiachagi úr, chodan an caga as an Elden. Henk lungan summerlad, jay or na gael, stiach sa vairum sain yes. Asian chosen na Hellenen chowstein alban, vosh riachan vanin as na Hellenen. Ons trí cíd jeg as trí jeg, henk Robert and Bruce a talú son a chiad cheayrt ag grumsé. Hugan lungas cagi hos nach leo, trí lungan frangach, bleis François Thureau, lug caga mara, je cion yerbi, stiach ons bairum sé, on siach ki jeg as trí feed. Húr Thureau heen, be vei na chiartach an Ellen, as eisn en all on shoh, bes sa caga an Lairoi. Ramsay's in the sunniest area of the Isle of Man, with relatively low rainfall, so it often lives up to its description of shining by the sea. It's because it lies in an area protected by the hills from the prevailing winds blowing up from the southwest. As rain clouds come over the island, they rise up over the uplands and discharge most of their contents there before they reach Ramsay. Ramsay, past and present, has just been published by the Machel-based Loaghtan Books. The book is based around images from the collection of Ray Stanfield, with modern photographs by George Hobbs. The text is by fourth Manx bard Sara Goodwins, and she and George told Bob Carswell about the book, which is the fourth in a series of books showing the then and now of the island's towns.
It is the fourth, yes. The other three are Port Erin, Peel and Castletown, and this one's Ramsay, which is, of course, just down the road from us. It was quite nice because it meant that we could spend more time actually going there and looking at things rather than having to travel the length of the island. It's the same sort of setup as the others. It's 128 pages, old photographs, old postcards with a modern match to try and show people what's changed, if anything's changed, and quite a lot in Ramsay has. So it's, basically that.
Looking at the then and now, as you say, there's so much changed in Ramsay, but were there any particular elements that surprised you more?
Well, there were, actually. I knew that there had been a lot of clearance of the old town at the end of the 1960s, early 1970s. What I hadn't realised before I started doing the research is just how unsuited Ramsay was to be a town at all, because it was built to serve the sea, to serve seafarers, and it was a superb natural port, but it wasn't really very good for building on because it was very low and marshy and soggy and flooded. And so I didn't realise just how much of Ramsay is actually built on reclaimed land, where they've drained it and put in extra barriers for the sea and all that sort of thing, which is not really surprising that it still floods occasionally nowadays. When I was doing the research of Ramsay, I didn't realise that Marketplace was not filled in until quite late, and that some fishing boats or merchant boats, that sort of thing, could actually tie up outside St Paul's Church. And I didn't know that. And if you picture it, it's incredible to think that boats could actually come that far in, or up if it's up the river. At that point, I think the Marketplace was filled in something like 1817, something like that. And I really didn't know, because nowadays you go there and it's cars parked there and people bustle about and there's more buildings. And I didn't realise that used to be sea.
Again, you've used Ray Stanfield's collection of images as a background to it. How far back do Ray's images go, in fact?
They go quite a long way back. He has a superb collection, and particularly some of the, not so much in Ramsay, but some of the photographs he has of Douglas, they I mean, it's incredible. It's just about when the Tower of Refuge was built. He's got some of a new Tower of Refuge and things like that. It's incredible. The Ramsay ones, part of the problem we had, and it's not Ray's fault at all, is that the old town was not considered very photogenic when postcards were being taken at the beginning of the 20th century, the end of the 19th century. Most postcards were taken then. Nowadays we would think it was delightful and oldie worldy. Then it was considered, well, it's a bit grubby, isn't it? It's working class, bit of a slum. None of which was true, but it didn't feature that much in postcards. So the old town, which no longer exists, is not as well featured or not as well pictured as I would have liked. We've had to sort of be creative and talk about, well, in the background of this you can see what isn't there anymore, because it wasn't actually photographed at the time.
Mm. And that must have been one of the difficulties for yourself then, looking at the changes and looking for photographs, trying to pinpoint exactly what you're looking at and what it might have been in the old days.
Indeed, Bob, that's just right. The Old Town Cross was in the middle of the redeveloped area, and you can look at the Old Swan Inn and you can look at the street pattern, and you go there and you think, where is this then? And again, yes, you can position yourself in a housing estate and get a distant view of St Paul's Square and Queen's Court flats, and you think, this is about it, but it's not really a very stunning comparison, I'm afraid. Again, even though things have moved on, then there are still the occasional landmarks that you can pick out from that. Obviously St Paul's Church is still there and gives you a pointer if there's anything sticking above the skyline on that, but in many instances South Ramsey, you can almost forget it.
And even in more recent years there have been changes in Ramsey, and they'll be documented as well.
Hopefully, yes. One of the things that we find that with doing this sort of book is that it changes all the time. For example, when we were doing most of the book, Ramsey Bakery was a working bakery, and it's now gone. The fish shop Camelli's, in the book it's pictured where it was about a month ago, and it's since moved, which we didn't know. I mean, it's not moved very far, it's just moved down the street, but there are quite a lot of things that change all the time, and you have to, although we try and get it right, you have to say, no, we've got to stop now, otherwise we'd never finish it, because everything changes, everything evolves.
One of the old pictures shows the steam train on the quay extension of the Manx Northern Railway, and a gang of young lads riding their bikes alongside the train, as they would, and the engine gently puffing along. And in the distance you can just about see the tower of the Catholic Church looming over the back of the buildings beyond the harbour. The only way I could get a match of that picture was to almost lie on the wall outside the Ramsey Bakery, line up the Catholic Church above the swing bridge through the trees, and then take the picture. But there's new buildings built on the left, there is no remnants of the railway whatsoever, and just a bit of road outside where the quay was. And you think, yeah, it's got to be the same place, but you've actually got to be very low, which is difficult for someone like me, to take the picture at all.
There's a nice set of pictures in there of the demolition of the old Catholic Church, and we actually had some trouble finding. Obviously it's on the same site as the new Catholic Church, but there's an old warehouse that we were assured was part of that site but was flattened, and we didn't know where it was. And then George eventually found that part of the wall of the old warehouse actually still exists as part of the wall around the new Catholic Church, so we could identify where it was. But the nice thing I like is that the old Catholic Church, the far wall of it, does still exist as a sort of a shrine to the Virgin Mary and Child outside the new Catholic Church, and I like that. There's a continuity between the two. I think that's good.
Sara Goodwins and George Hobbs of Loaghtan Books, and their latest publication, Ramsey, Past and Present, available now at $14.95. As le Shenn Houney gus jerrey Shiaght Laa and cheayrt shoh. Marilyn Crellin will be here next Thursday at 6. But that's it for this week. So from me, Eisht, Shenn Houney, Fiona McArdle, Slenn you.